If you grew up going to church regularly, or even semi-regularly as a kid, you've probably attended a Palm Sunday service. It's one of those lesser-known Christian celebrations, and as a kid, I always thought it was an odd holiday. I mean, it came a couple months after Christmas and 1 week before Easter, so it had a lot of competition in terms of Christian celebrations. You didn't get any gifts, there's no candy, just a long sermon from a pastor and a palm leaf that's shaped like a cross. But Palm Sunday is much more than just getting a free palm leaf over the weekend. And in this video, we will briefly review the story, meaning, and significance of Palm Sunday. That way, you'll be able to appreciate it better and adequately answer the question, what is Palm Sunday all about? Welcome to The Current Christian, where we connect with and encourage disciples like you in leading fruitful ministries. To all the current Christians out there who have subscribed and are watching this video right now, I just want to say thank you for all of your love and support. I really hope all of you who are watching this right now can get a lot of useful information out of this video. Around the holidays like Christmas, Easter, and Palm Sunday, we see major spikes in discussions around the topic of God, Jesus, and the Bible. So being able to talk to others about the significance and meaning of these celebrations is a great way to share your faith in Jesus and possibly introduce others to Jesus too. So let's review what we'll be learning in this video. The way we will be breaking everything down is by first briefly explaining what Palm Sunday is. Then, we'll summarize the various accounts of Palm Sunday found in the Bible. After this, I'll point out how it connects with the Old Testament. Then, we'll wrap up by talking about what lessons and truths can be learned from the story of Palm Sunday. First things first, what's Palm Sunday all about? To put it simply, Palm Sunday is the Sunday before Easter where we celebrate and remember Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, where he knew he would later be crucified. Now, the Bible doesn't specifically say that we are to celebrate Palm Sunday, but this doesn't mean it wasn't a significant event. In fact, Jesus' entry was so important that this was mentioned in every single gospel account. So that means we read about it in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Here's a bit of advice when it comes to reading the Bible. When you see repeated themes or stories, it typically means it's something important. Just how a teacher will repeat something more than once in order to communicate significance, the authors of the Bible have done the same exact thing. So, if there are repeated words, themes, or imagery in the Bible, it probably means that God is trying to communicate something significant to you. Alright, to recap, Palm Sunday is celebrating Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, where he was later crucified. The authors of the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John saw Jesus' entry into Jerusalem as such a significant event that they all wrote about it in their gospel accounts. But why was this stroll into Jerusalem so important? Well, to adequately answer that question, I think it would be a good time to review how the separate books of the Bible depict Palm Sunday. So the Palm Sunday story begins with Jesus and his disciples approaching Jerusalem. When they get to the Mount of Olives, Jesus sends two disciples to get a young donkey and told them that if anyone asks, say that the Lord needs it. In the book of Matthew and John, the author points out to the reader that what is taking place right now is fulfilling an old prophecy which can be found in the book of Zechariah. The two disciples come back with the donkey, place their cloaks over it, and Jesus then sits on the donkey. As Jesus rode this donkey towards Jerusalem, crowds began praising and placing their cloaks and palm leaves on the ground. That, in a nutshell, is what took place when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. But if you were to read through the story in all four books, you'll very quickly notice that each author has a different account for what specific things took place. For example, in Matthew, it says that both a young donkey and its mother were brought to Jesus. In John, it says that Jesus found the young donkey himself. And in Luke, it doesn't have any mention of people placing palm leaves on the ground. Even though each account isn't exactly the same, it doesn't mean the story is invalid. The main points, which include Jesus riding on a donkey into Jerusalem, people praising Jesus, and people placing cloaks or palm leaves in front of him, are still present in every single story. But what is so significant about this entry into Jerusalem? Well, when you combine all the separate accounts into one, we see three themes that answer why the story is significant. The first theme is that Jesus is asserting himself as king, specifically from the line of David. This is probably one of the easiest themes to pick up on because we see Jesus address himself as Lord, and people in the crowd address him as Lord as well. Not only that, but people are laying down their cloaks and palm leaves as Jesus is rolling up into Jerusalem on a donkey. Now that is some royal treatment if I do say so myself. But it wasn't just a kind gesture that the people were doing. Laying down cloaks and palm leaves was an image of enthronement that we see happen in 2 Kings and 1 Maccabees. The people here are making a literal statement that Jesus is king, and in the book of John and Matthew, the author pulls a quote from the prophet Zechariah, who says that the king will come to them riding on a donkey. Now that's the first major theme. Jesus is asserting himself as king, and it makes sense that everyone is happy about getting a king. At this point in history, the Jewish people aren't ruled by their own king. They are ruled and oppressed by the Romans. The Jewish people have been eagerly waiting for a king from the bloodline of David to come and set them free. So the idea of having, this young Jewish man named Jesus become king was very exciting for everyone in the crowds. This idea of being set free leads us into our second major theme, which is Jesus has come to save everyone. If you go to the verse in Zechariah that is quoted in John and Matthew, we see in verse 10 and 14 that the king will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. The Lord, their God, will save his people on that day, as a shepherd saves his flocks. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. All throughout the Old Testament, there has been this continuous message of God bringing someone who will defeat evil and bring justice, peace, and restore order in the world. Over time, this message has become a beacon of hope for the Jewish people whenever they were oppressed or held in exile. God told his people that he is going to bring a savior, a king from the bloodline of David. A king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. This is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness. When the Jewish people heard that Jesus was coming to be king, they were excited because they knew he was going to save them. They thought he was going to, go right up into Jerusalem, beat the bad guys, and then, God would bring his people to freedom once again. But what the people didn't expect is how Jesus was going to defeat evil, which takes us into our third major theme. Jesus is setting himself apart in order to be sacrificed. This one may be a little harder to pick up on when you first read through the story. In Luke chapter 19 verse 30 and Mark chapter 11 verse 2, Jesus specifies that the donkey is one that has never been ridden on. In Jewish tradition, they would take an animal, such as a lamb or a calf that haven't ever been put to work before, and use it as a sacrifice. This animal would be like a clean metaphorical sponge that would absorb all the wrong things the community has done. Then, when this animal would be killed, all the evil acts that were placed on it would die too. When Jesus was riding the donkey, no one knew that there was symbolism and prophecy attached to it. Jesus wasn't bringing the donkey into Jerusalem to be used as a sacrifice. Rather, it was the donkey that was bringing the sacrifice into Jerusalem. The Jewish people around Jesus knew he was declaring himself to be king. They expected him to go into Jerusalem in order to drive out all the evil people. But they didn't see that Jesus had bigger plans. The way he was going to defeat evil and become king was by allowing his own life to be taken instead of taking away the lives of others. The Jewish people had high expectations of what was going to happen when Jesus entered the city, but many of them were disappointed with the results. They saw their king, their teacher, their savior die just a few days after entering the city. God knew many people were going to be disappointed, but he was okay with disappointing them. God was okay with not meeting the expectations and hopes of others. In fact, God didn't want to meet their expectations. He wanted to surpass them. God may be coming to do something big in your life. You may be praising him, following him, and even telling others about him. But are you ready for God to disappoint you? And I know that sounds like a weird question, but I mean, are you okay with God not meeting your expectations so that he can surpass them? If you ever wondered what Palm Sunday was all about, it's more than just Jesus riding on a donkey into a city and people placing palm leaves on the ground. It's a representation of God coming to do big things in all of our lives. It's about Jesus coming to set up his rule as king, to save us from all the evil in our life, and the way he did that was by taking the consequences we deserve and nailing it on the cross with him. I hope this video was able to speak to you in a profound way, and be sure to share this to one other person who may want to know more about the story of Palm Sunday. Feel free to write any kind of prayer requests you may have in the comments below, and thank you for watching. I'd also like to thank our community of supporters over on Patreon. This video wouldn't be made possible without you. Remember to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon if you haven't done so already. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.